Welcome, friends of the Museum of South Texas History, to Museum Pláticas, the March 2023 edition. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a dive into Ranch Gala, a program of the museum. The museum has engaged in this program for 39 years, where the museum attempts to reward those members of the museum who contribute yearly. And so what the museum does is it identifies a ranch, a historic South Texas ranch, and takes Heritage Associate members to that ranch to have a big party. And so it is a way to say thank you to our membership, and also a way to celebrate and to really be in a ranch and in the middle of history and to just have a good time. March the 25th, the museum will be hosting its next Ranch Gala. And this Ranch Gala will be at the Margo Ranch in Stark County. So today, we're going to have this, I think, fascinating conversation with Dr. Margo. And so Dr. Margo, who comes from Stark County, who was raised in Rio Grande City, probably born in Rio Grande City. Roberto Margo is a veterinarian. He's been a veterinarian since the late 60s. And so today, I will be joined by El Dr. Roberto Margo for a plática, for this installment of Museum Plática. So stay with us, and I think you will really enjoy this conversation today. Okay, welcome back, friends of the Museum of South Texas History, to the March 2023 edition of Museum Pláticas. My name is Francisco Guajardo. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the museum, and today I am really excited to be with a person who I just met, but who I have been hearing about, El Dr. Roberto Margo. Dr. Margo, welcome to the museum.
Well, thank you.
Is this your first time in the museum?
It sure is.
Really?
That's right.
Huh.
It's the first time.
First time in the museum. So I need to tell you a few things about the museum that I think are relevant to what we're about to discuss here.
Okay.
This museum was founded by families who were steeped in ranching culture. They weren't the only families that founded the museum, but the driving force was families who were very much, about the kind of the lore of South Texas ranching. And they wanted to do something about preserving ranch history, family history, and those kinds of things.
That's right.
So you being here is actually very appropriate, because you come from a ranching family. Is this true?
Oh, yes, definitely.
When does the ranching history begin for Roberto Margo's family?
Well, I guess 1902, Dad was born and sent to the ranch at 17 years of age in 1918 during the pandemic because he was very sick with a flu, I guess it was. And his dad sent him over there because he had to eat some wildlife and see if he could survive out there because he had a worker out there. And so he did go, and he made it. He made it through that disease, and he started liking that kind of life. And my granddad had a lot of horses. He would tell me back then, and he realized that the horses not going to produce much for you. And so in the long run, he got rid of horses and started with cattle. And he bought out his sisters when my grandfather, when he divided to his family, he bought out his sisters and one brother. And that's how he got started.
So, Dr. Margo, let me back up a little bit because I heard a story there that was a really interesting story. So you said that your father, well, first of all, your father's name?
Raimundo T. Margo.
Raimundo. And did he spell the name with an E or an A? Raimundo?
R-E-Y.
R-A or R-E?
R-E.
Raimundo. So Raimundo, you said, was born about 1902?
He was born 1902.
And where was he born?
I imagine in Roma, Rio Grande City.
Starr County.
Starr County.
So he was born in Starr County. So who were Raimundo's parents?
My granddad was Roberto Margo, and his wife was Science. I'm terrible.
but okay, his wife was he from Starr County or was he born in Europe?
Do you mind if I just go back a little bit?
Let's go back.
Okay.
Yes.
In the 1800s, my great-grandfather, Robert Margo, came from France. He sailed from France and went up the Rio Grande River. And he tried Rio Grande City first, that area, and he didn't care for it, so he kept on going and landed in Roma. And that's where his life began. His name was Roberto Margo, but with a T at the end. And after a while, the people in Roma, would say Margot. So he dropped the T, and that's where Margo started. So
this name is a French name.
Yes.
It's French.
Yes.
And so the little reading that I did says that he came from Lorraine.
He sure did.
Okay, so Lorraine in France, which for many, many years was hotly contested between the Germans and the French. Yeah, I mean, there was always and it may have been, because one of the questions that I had for you was whether you ever heard any stories of why Robert would have left Lorraine as a young man, if it was because of, some kind of military kind of, situation or any of that. Do you know?
I have not. I do not know. I never heard anything.
Do you know if he knew German?
Not that I know of.
But he knew French. He must have.
He must have.
He must have known
He must
French.
have.
Yeah.
He must have.
So when you say that he came up the river, he came through the mouth of the river?
Mouth of the river.
And then came up.
Yes, that's right.
So on a steamboat.
Yeah.
Must have been on the
He
steamboat.
must have been a steamboat.
And so he went up to Rio Grande and he found, I'm going to look for something else. Goes up to Roma.
Yes,
Y le gustó Roma.
that's right.
I mean, he would have gotten to Roma right about the time that Manuel Guerra was at his strength.
That's right.
Yes?
Yes.
Well, what do you know about that?
Well, I don't know much. No, it just the name sounded familiar.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's when my great grandfather got married in the 1800s and had a son and two daughters.
And Raymond is one of those.
No,
No.
that was his son.
No, I'm sorry. No, Raymond would be
My dad.
your father. And so
Yes, son.
your father's father.
My father's father, Robert Margo, had one son, Roberto,
Okay.
Margo,
Roberto.
and two sisters. And then he himself had 9 children, Roberto, Margo, and including my dad, one of the youngest.
Mm.
And they were in Roma, during this time, and with a large family like that, I understood from these are things that my dad would tell me, that he needed some income, some more money, so he moved to Regan City and built a big old saloon over there, Margo Saloon. That's when the Fort Wrinkle was going full blast.
The Margo Saloon.
That's right. That's the Margo Saloon, and that's where he made his money, and got land because people. I'm sure there was a lot of gambling going on, and people would borrow money and mortgage their land, and that's how he accumulated some land. And then I just read that he just bought his first piece of land in 1897, and well, in the meantime, my great grandfather died, and in 1800, sometime 1800, and she remarried a Duffy, and he ran against the Guerras in 1907, I think it was, for sheriff, and he was assassinated there in that saloon, Margo Saloon. Daddy was, of course, just born in 1902, but anyhow, that's why I smiled a while ago when you said,
Well,
Guerra.
that killing is a famous story.
It sure is.
That's about the time that Manuel Guerra is also fighting with Lassiter.
That's right.
Are you gonna smile at that story also?
Yeah, I've got the book of last.
You got the book, yeah. So this is so your family would have been right in the middle as saloon owners of a very colorful history in Stark County
That's right.
that was controlled by the big political boss, Manuel Guerra.
That's right.
And other people wanted to have a little bit of a share
Exactly.
of things.
The Republicans from Furious.
Yes. And they tended to be people who wanted to change things.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. The Margo Saloon, that would have closed down about what time? Do you have any idea?
Well, if I remember, it got burned down. Something, yeah.
It
burned.
was burned down.
Yes.
As part of like political stuff?
I have no idea what happened there.
Well, because the killing was political stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Wow. So, you as a child growing up, you used to listen to these stories?
Well, Dad would tell us.
Your
yes.
father would tell you.
Yes.
How long did your father live? How old was he when he passed away?
He was 94. He died in 1996. 95 or 96.
95 or 96. Wow. So you had a good long life and relationship with your father.
Well, I came back from the service, and he would beg me to practice in Regan City. And I said, Dad, I don't know what I'm going to do when I get out of service. So finally he convinced me, and and told me he would have he had 15 acres there in town. And so I came back from the service and started there, and he showed me the 15 acres. It was all brush, prickly pear and brush. And so he did give me 2 acres on top of the hill to build my home if I would just stay, if I was going to stay there and build a home. And that's exactly what I did, and we've been there since.
Wow.
And yes.
When you say on top of the hill, what do you mean?
Well, I forget the name of the La Loma del Pelón or something like that we call it there, but it's a hill. It's a
Tony, what's
high,
that?
high area. It's a high area in town.
In town.
It's about 5 blocks from Carlos Restaurant from the main street, up the street, and but my uncle, J.P. Margo, had a tineria, a tannery there in the same property. Oh, he owned it, that's right, my uncle. Anyhow, the slab is still there and everything, and finally Dad purchased from him, and he let me have 2 acres, and then eventually, when I was 71, I built my house there, and started my clinic right in front of my home.
Wow.
Because I wouldn't have to be going very far, because I started working for him. He wanted me to help him. That's why he wanted me there, because he had caterpillars. He was a brilliant man. He had caterpillars. He was one of the first to plant that buffalo grass that you see all over now from Africa. And so I helped him for 17 and a half years, manager of the ranch of that 7,200 acres that he had. And so after we divided in 95, I guess it was, I started practicing, just solely practicing and ranching on the side on my own unit at the ranch.
So I want to ask you about the buffalo grass in a little bit, but I'm
Okay.
curious to know about La Loma.
Okay.
Did La Loma ever intrigue you about what it was about the? I mean, I don't know if you ever saw.
Well, it's a hilly area where I live.
It's a hilly
You
area.
go down and go
Yes.
up another hill, another high area further away.
Because there's some geographers who in the last 10 years have done research on, of course, what's called the hill country, of
That's
the
right.
valley. And so they point to a very, very violent volcano that erupted in La Sierra Madre, about 300 miles from here, south of here. 27 million years ago, there was a volcano that erupted and spewed this magma over a long period of time. And so that magma created this cloud of volcanic ash. And some of the expressions of that volcanic ash are the hills in Stark County.
Is that right?
60 feet almost of volcanic ash formation that is now expressed in those hills, and probably where you were.
More than likely.
Isn't that a crazy story?
That sure is. It sure is.
Wow. Okay. Buffalo grass. Did you all harvest buffalo grass, or did you buy seed from other places?
No, Dad harvested the seed and sold the seed. He was one of the first to plant it himself, and he had caterpillars, and he root plowed and disturbed the soil and planted buffalo grass and devised a machine to be able to, with a tractor, harvest the seed from the plants. And he sold thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds.
All over the
South
place.
Texas and into Mexico.
Into Mexico. So it so about what time would your father when was it that he first brought the seed from Africa or Asia? Because he came from those two places.
Africa.
He got his from Africa.
It was from Africa. It was a test plot there at the ranch, at his ranch, and where they planted it, where they tested it was up, I don't know, 5 acres, 6 acres, something like that. But after that, well, that's when he started planting it himself, and it developed all over, and it's the best thing that could have happened.
Because
in South Texas.
it had good nutrients for cattle.
Nutrients, and also drought resistant, and it north of San Antonio it doesn't grow much because it gets too cold. But from that area to south to Mexico, you find it everywhere.
Did you participate in the harvest of the buffalo grass?
I was working. I was working for Dad.
You were working for your father.
He had a big old fan, about 6 feet in diameter, that it blew, and to clean the seed, just so that the germ of it would be used, and get all the other stuff off. And he had piles and piles of seed there at the ranch, in the barn.
So, Dr. Margo, the original place that was settled on the ranch, because you told the story of your father, right? Who was sent to the ranch.
Yes, in Las Comitas, we call it
Las Comitas. Dr. Margo, ¿qué es una comita?
It's una coma, a tree.
A tree, a coma tree.
Sí.
And it gives out like black
What's
berries.
that? Blackberry.
And
They're edible.
they're edible, yes.
Yes.
And so they call that ranch Las Comitas
They call that ranch, that area, Las Comitas.
because there's a lot of coma trees.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's right.
And so when was the first house built there in Las Comitas?
Well, that's when 1917, I guess, in the 20s, something like that, Dad got married the first time with a lady from Rancho Viejo, close by, and they had one daughter, Angelina Jolly, and he built he had just a little shack that we were staying there, working for Dad, and they built another little house there where he and his first wife and his daughter, I guess, lived for a couple of years. I guess she died pretty soon after giving birth. I don't know how long it took.
His wife died.
His first wife, yes.
Yes.
And it's right. It would just so happen that the unit I got is that area. So we got the Noria de Buque, the water reservoir, the wall, and everything that was built in the 1800s and is still being used.
Wow.
And
Is it a natural well, or you're saying it was dug?
They dug it.
They dug it in the 1800s.
It's the 1800s.
Okay.
And it's still, of course, it's not producing water anymore. We got a windmill go into that area for many years. So in the 70s, I guess, or 80s, that we made another well adjacent and put a windmill there. But the Noria Buque is open right now, and it's still there, and there's writings there on the wall. I don't know, there was no cement then, I don't know how they did it. But anyhow, it's quite a place, a lot of history there.
Wow. So, so the story of your father is that during the Spanish influenza, it must have been, right? 1917, 1918.
It sure was, the pandemic.
During that pandemic, your father got sick and he was sent to the ranch.
Exactly.
To isolate him or to heal? Or both?
Both.
Both. And he was a kid. He was like
He was 17 years old.
So he goes to the ranch and he gets better. And so you said that he got better because he was just like living off the land
Oh,
and
yeah.
with the
Oh,
animals
yeah.
and eating the whatever he could kill.
Right, that's right.
And he got better. And he got strong.
He made it.
He
yes.
made it. So that's one story from the Spanish influenza. That's a good story.
That's right.
Wow. Your father, and then you speak of your father as a brilliant man,
He sure was.
innovator.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's amazing the things he did. And all with just at the most a 7th grade education. But he could deal with anybody, and he was a brilliant individual, but he was a hard-working.
He was a hard worker. Did your father know any French?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? You would have known.
Well, I wouldn't know.
You would have known. Yeah. Huh. So it's interesting how, because, you know, your ancestors came from Lorraine and France, so they would have come in as French speakers.
That's right.
So, but the French would have been lost, like within a generation. I'm thinking, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so they would become people from the border. Like you're a person from the border. So you are Spanish speaking, you're English speaking.
Well, Spanish speaking because my mother is originally from Mexico, from Matamoros. And so we are descendants from France, on my dad's side, and from Mexico, from my mother's side.
How your mother from Matamoros? How did she come to meet your father?
That's a good question. I wish I'd have asked him. Not sure.
How long did your mother live?
Well, she died at 67 years of age in 78, 78, I guess it was.
She was young when she died.
Yes, she was 67 years
¿De
of age.
qué murió?
Pues, we never knew whether it was the heart. I guess it must have not been the heart. I don't know. We don't know. We never knew exactly what it was, but she was just with a urinary problem, and so I don't know.
And were you?
I was 35 years old, and then, and so it really hit me hard, and Dad, of course. But I took care of Dad after that until he passed away.
But you don't know how she got from Matamoros up to Stark County.
No.
Well,
I never asked those questions.
You never. Well, I probably should stop asking then.
No, I don't know.
It's an interesting, I think, situation, you know, because did they meet like somewhere along the river? Because you know the river was.
Wow, okay. Her parents. Oh, yeah. Well, she was born in Matamoros, yeah, but her parents settled in Rio Grande City.
Oh, okay. So she was from Stark County.
Yeah, definitely, but
Okay.
she was born over there.
In Matamoros, okay.
And now she was in Rio Grande City. That's where he met her, and you know what it takes.
Yeah. So you know, some people talk about the valley as being riverboat towns and railroad towns. And so the riverboat towns were the towns that were the important places in the 1800s, you know, and even into the early 1900s. And so if you were in Matamoros, it makes a lot of sense that you could have landed somewhere in, you know, in Camargo or Rio Grande or Roma, because that was the movement. It wasn't so much like this. It was like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a railroad track on my property there where I live. There was back then, and even when I was practicing, it was the tracks were there right behind my house. But so there was railroad service up to Rio Grande City. I don't know what they moved, but.
So, Dr. Margo, how are we doing? Are we doing okay?
I'm
Con la
fine.
plática?
Oh, yeah.
We're doing okay. How about if we do this? We're going to go on break so that if people who are watching us need to go get, you know, a glass of water or a cup of coffee or something,
Okay.
they can do that. And then when we come back, I want to know about, your childhood,
Sure.
how it was growing up, in Rio Grande, and your time at the ranch and that sort of thing. And
Okay.
then I want to move into the ranch, and because that's where we're going on the 25th.
That's right.
We're going out to the ranch, but I want to get a better sense of you, and what was it like for you as a child growing up. Okay.
Fine.
So friends of the museum, when we come back, we're gonna delve into the childhood of El Doctor Margo. All right, so stay with us. Okay, welcome back, friends of the museum. Francisco Guajardo here, having a museum plática with El Doctor Margo. So, Dr. Margo, you heard what we were talking about here in between. And so I asked your wife, what kind of questions should I ask him? And I asked your son, and your son, pitched an interesting idea. He said that you were a tough guy. I mean, that's a son saying that about the father. That you were tough when you were working the cattle, that you were tough out in the ranch, I'm guessing is what he meant. What do you think your son would mean when he says that he's tough as nails, is what he said? What does that mean?
Well, I guess it would be the times I made him knock down calves so I could vaccinate them and everything. And it was either him and Ricky or Michael. And they just roll over him, the calves, and kick him once or twice, and no crying. I said, just get up and keep on going. But anyhow, instead we bought a ranch, my late brothers, myself, and we had to do that work out there. There was no shooting or anything over there. But I guess that's what it means. And the one that was really rough with my dad.
Your father was a tough guy.
He ruled with an iron hand.
Wow.
But that's the way he accomplished everything he did. Mm-hmm. And really, I'm proud of him, what he did in his life.
Well, he seems to have had a very consequential, accomplished life. If you look at somebody who would have developed a ranch, somebody who would have innovated with buffalo grass. Not only brought it in, planted it, but harvested it and figured out ways to take it to scale. That's impressive. I mean, that's about this, and that's about this,
Oh,
and that's
yeah.
about, not giving up.
That's right. You're very correct. Because he developed with a friend of his from Laredo how to harvest, also how to do root plow work with a caterpillar, and also set up a system where the seed can be spread at the same time. And all that took thinking and brain power to figure all those things out and get it done.
When you were a child, say you were 6, 7, 8 years old, your parents would have sent you to elementary school, I'm guessing.
Yes,
Where did you go to first grade?
Immaculate Conception School at a convent school in town.
And
First
were
through
you
the eighth.
first? Were you taught by nuns?
Oh yes,
Yes. What kind of nuns were they over at Immaculate Conception?
very strict Sisters of Mercy.
They taught you good grammar.
Well, in addition to,
What does that mean?
well, yes, they did. I'll just answer it that way.
Okay, well, I'm gonna prod you a little bit because, my wife went to Catholic school, and she seems to think that the reason she developed good language skills was because of Catholic school. The reason she developed good math skills was because of Catholic school. The reason that she, was disciplined in life was because of Catholic school. The reason she, knew how to respect was because of Catholic
Well,
school.
that's very true.
Yes?
Very true. That's right.
Who is the one teacher who you remember so clearly? Sister somebody. You know that story, Dr. Margo.
Geralda.
So what about Sister Geralda?
She made a man out of me. I was really and truly the pet of the sisters in the lower grades, and when I got to her, she straightened me out.
Oh, 'cause did you say that you were like a teacher's pet in the
Yeah.
younger grades? And then you got to the 4th grade?
No,
Or
well,
fifth?
later, yeah, 8th grade.
8th grade?
She's the one that was the principal of the school,
Oh.
and she was tough.
Did she paddle you?
Well, I better not say anything. No.
But she was a disciplinarian.
Oh yes.
Wow. So were you like a mischievous kid?
Well, so I find out I was. I guess
You found out you were.
I got into trouble sometimes.
Do you remember your 8th grade graduation? Or did you have a graduation?
I guess we did. Yes.
Yeah, you must have had a
Yeah.
graduation. And then, so after that, you went to high school,
Yep.
Rio Grande City High School?
Rio Grande City,
And where was Rio Grande City High School when you went there?
Fort Ringgold.
It was in Fort Ringgold.
Yes.
When you went to Rio Grande City High School at Fort Ringgold, did the teachers talk about the place, Fort Ringgold itself? Did they talk about the buildings you were in?
Well, not really, but we knew what.
You knew.
Yeah, because the buildings that we were using for classrooms were the barracks and the places that they have there.
You knew.
Oh yes.
You knew. You knew, that it was very historical.
Oh,
That it went back.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Oh yes.
When did you graduate from high school?
61.
1961.
That's right.
And you told me before that your wife of many years now was your high school sweetheart.
That's right.
So tell me about her a little bit. Tell me about when you met her. Do you remember when you met her?
Wow. Well, you're getting personal.
You don't have to answer it. But
No.
Go ahead.
Well, she's a beautiful girl there in high school, and I started dating her, and we continued on.
What is her name?
Her name?
Yes.
Minerva
Minerva. And what is Minerva's maiden name? What is her?
Hernandez.
Hernandez. And Minerva was from Rio Grande?
from Rio Grande City, and her parents lived about a half a block from the convent school. They're also very well known there in town, and were very well known. And so, no, it's a very good family, of course.
And you've been with Minerva ever since.
That's right.
Lo felicito, Dr. Margo. Lo felicito.
54 years of marriage.
Wow, that's great. And she's here. She's here with us. Yeah.
That's right.
She actually suggested that I ask you a question. And so she wants me to ask you about what role she had in your practice as a veterinarian.
A big role. Big role because your wife can make you or break you. And she made me because she took care of the 4 boys. We had 4 sons. And when I was working all the time, she was the one that disciplined them, especially Carlos here. And but anyhow, she took care of the family there. She was very strict with them, and I would come from work, and then I'd let them have it again. And anyhow, she has helped me in life, in my practice. And like I told you, she would run blood samples for brucellose testing at the sale yard, and she would help me in rabies clinics with the dogs all over the place and barking every which way. And no, she's been tremendous with me all the time.
Wow. It sounds like she's been a real gift for you.
It sure is. Sure has.
Wow. What did you do in 1961 after you finished high school?
Texas A&M.
You went to Texas A&M?
That's right.
To College Station?
Yes. Yes, I was lucky enough. My sophomore year in A&M, I got accepted into veterinary school, and I finished 3 years later as a veterinarian. I was only 23 years old when I graduated as a veterinarian and went into the Air Force for 2 years.
Now, why did you go into the Air Force? Was there like a pathway for A&M graduates to get into the Air Force?
Well, you could get into the Army, or if you did not volunteer, you'd get drafted with the Vietnam War going. So they told me that you want to go as an officer, or do you want to go as a private when they draft you? Where do I sign? I said.
So this was the reality of the Vietnam War, and so you figured out what is it that makes sense for you.
Definitely.
And as a veterinarian, did you do anything that was veterinary related in the Air Force?
Yes. All our main work was food inspector. All the eating facilities on base. It was under my responsibility. Public health was my responsibility, but I took care of all the sentry dogs and all that. Yes, especially out there in Thailand.
What did your tag say? Did it say Margo?
Margo?
And did they call you Dr. Margo?
No, I was Captain Margo.
Captain Margo. Wow. Any good stories about being in the Air Force?
Well, we cannot.
You can't
tell you the story.
You can't tell the story.
Open.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
No. I had a good time. I spent a whole year out there, isolated, and my oldest son was only 3 days old when I got my orders to go isolated out there.
So, Dr. Margo, who approached you or your family about the idea of having a ranch gala for the museum at the ranch? Do you remember who approached you about that?
Right there, Carlos.
Carlos did?
Yes.
So somebody approached Carlos?
That's right.
So that must have been Sabrina from the museum, a trustee, or maybe Lynn would have. So I'm not clear about that idea, but I'm going to ask you what it is that, I don't know how many people are going to go to the ranch. It could be 300. It could be 350. That's a lot of people.
That's right.
And so what are they going to see when they go out to the ranch? What are the stories that people should know about that ranch, so that they can, like, be steeped in the history of the place?
Well, the important thing is that the improvements, well, let me just go back a little bit in Dad's time when I was managing the ranch for him. His main interest was, of course, the cattle business and everything else on the buffalo grass and everything. But it was 7,200 acres. But when you divide 7,200 acres, and we all get 1,000 some odd acres, when you don't have the volume of cattle like we had then, you don't have the income that to be able to make it. It's expensive to be a rancher, but to have the income and to have and all that, you have to have the numbers of cattle. Okay, so that's why since then I was already working on with the caterpillars, setting up strips of brush and open areas for deer hunting later. And Dad would go out there. I said, "What a mess you're making out here." I said, "Okay, it's all right." But he'd like to clean, from fence to fence. And so I changed things and I started making, and that's how you were able to now have the strips and a hunting enterprise that we have, a very successful one right now. And that's what I want the people to see. Coming in, you drive in and you see strips. Of course, it's going to be late in the evening, I guess, but strips of monte and this monte. And, but anyhow, because you have to be able to supplement your money somehow, either bird watching or something. So we have a deer, we have a real good crop of good deer country, good area.
So there's some good stories to tell.
Oh, yeah.
There's some good stories. I think that, what you just described, I think is a really good story for people to understand. I think the history that you described about, your grandfather, your father, the buffalo grass, I think is a very important story.
It's
is the
one of the
buffalo?
most important thing.
That's the important thing. That was like the economy.
That's right.
And so, is buffalo grass prominently featured for people who would go now to see it?
Prominently featured.
Yeah, like, do you see it? Do you see the buffalo?
Oh, you see it.
You see it's all over the place.
Yes.
Okay.
But the difference is also back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, buffalo grass was first, they just started that in the 40s, I guess, 50s, and it's really producing quite a bit. But now, later, much later, we're the ones dealing with it, that we are getting infested with other grasses that are cutting down the amount of buffalo grass available. There's bunch grass, KR blue stem, King Ranch blue stem, and all that, contaminating our hayfield. And so that's a situation that was not happening then, because it was just starting and it was really going full blast. That's why you had more cattle per acre than what we have now.
Wow. So the buffalo grass is kind of an important source of the growth even of the cattle industry.
Oh, it is a
Wow.
very important source,
Yeah.
because you just cannot depend on the native grasses so definitely,
Will you be there at the Ranch Gala?
you better believe it.
All right.
Are you going to be there?
I'm going to be there.
Hey,
I'm going
great.
to be there, and I'm going to really look forward to seeing
Well,
you.
we got somebody to work for us that day.
And we're going to have a lot of other people also. Dr. Margo, thank you so much for coming to the museum and sharing stories with us. I think you're a very charming person, and you're a
thank
smart
you.
person, you're a committed person, and as your son says, you were tough as nails. How about that? What else do you want to say, Dr. Margo, that maybe we haven't covered here?
Well, my wife, myself, my family, my boys, we're all elated to be able to show Stark County ranch land to our neighbors, Hidalgo County neighbors, and we thank you all for giving us this opportunity to show our land, our work, and thank you very much yourself.
Well, I think that we're the ones who need to be thanking you and your family for your generosity and your hospitality as well. So thank you, and we will see you there, not tomorrow, but the following Saturday.
Okay,
Thank you, Dr. Margo. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay, really enjoyed it. Okay, so that is the March 22 edition of Museum Pláticas. Before we break, I just want to ask the folks in the back, Carlos, anything we missed?
No, just
We're good? Mrs. Margo, anything we missed?
No, thank you.
Okay, Lynn, what did I miss?
Get your reservations in today.
Oh yeah, that's right. So Lynn Beeching is telling me to tell you to get your reservations in. If you're watching this, or if you see it on our website, because this will be posted right after we do this, you need to submit your names and reservations. So if you're a Heritage Associate member, you got tickets, but we need your names so we can know how many people are going to be there. Make sure we have enough food and enough seats and all of that. So make sure you get your names in. Thank you very much for joining us for the March 2023 edition of Museum Pláticas. And thank you so much, Dr. Margo.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay,
Gracias.
okay.